All right, good afternoon, everyone. At 3:06 p.m., the Baltimore County Administrative Charging Committee meeting is called to order on this 26th day of June. I'm going to start with a roll call, and we're going to ask our members just to provide a very brief introduction about ourselves. And I'll go first. I am Joan Harris. I'm the chair of this committee. I am a recently retired attorney, but I still keep my license because I do mediations for the circuit courts in the state. I was practicing for about 34 years, most of those doing insurance defense litigation, but I started my career as an assistant state's attorney for Baltimore County here. That was from 1986 to 92, so that was quite a long time ago. We are missing one person today, and that's Tiffany Justice, and just to let you know, Tiffany is, she's the Director of Security for Goucher College. And I know before she took that role, she also was a Deputy Assistant Director at George Washington University in DC. So you'll meet Tiffany at some point in the future. And then we'll go on to.
Hi, my name's Sharon Knecht. I'm from Catonsville. And professionally, I'm an archivist. But I'm very happy to be here and serve on this committee, and I appreciate you all coming today and speaking to us. Thanks.
Well, hi, I'm Christopher Tsui. My day job, I'm an attorney, and in my off time, sometimes I volunteer as an EMT firefighter.
I'm Dishon-Feurer. I live in Delp, which is the 7th district, and I am a member of the Police Accountability Board also. And I'm a personal assistant as a profession.
All right, so the first order of business is that the committee, have we reviewed and the meeting minutes from the last meeting of June the 9th? And I'm going to take a vote on approval unless anyone has any questions or wants to review it in any way. All right.
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes. And then I think the next thing we have will be a number of administrative updates, and I'm going to be asking Henry to post information on those subjects.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on technology, everyone here has received their laptops and email addresses from Baltimore County. The email address is particularly important for, again, conducting, sort of keeping everyone scheduled and setting up meetings, all those things, but also the laptops are for really primarily for the review of evidentiary files. And that's, so if anyone has any trouble with those, again, you have the IT number, and I know Jeff will be more than happy to help out. Jeff Kroll, who helped to set them up this afternoon. If you have any questions with yours, any trouble with logins, any trouble with just the programs, he'll be there to help with that as well. Future meeting locations, we have confirmed that Jefferson Hearing Room 104 is available for both the July and August meetings. That space is just across the street, and I will be confirming this week we don't have any technology issues whatsoever with that. Making sure that WebEx is perfectly functional there, and so that will be our future meeting location, at least for July and August. Update on the executive secretary position. We are in the process of finalizing that, so hopefully by the August meeting we should have the full-time executive secretary onboarded and ready to serve there. Update on stipends. The county council is next week voting on a compensation package for boards and commissions for the county, which includes the administrative charging committee. So once that is voted on, and again, there's still time for amendments or changes to it, but once it's finalized, then we'll be able to move forward on that. And I'll be in touch with everybody as to how to get the ball rolling on making sure those are taken care of. And then Open Meetings Act training. I know several of you have completed it, and once you complete it, you can just send me the certificate for that. I'll make sure that we have a copy. And again, we have several people now who have completed it, but if everyone can do so, that way there's no question, and if we have any absences, there's no issue with making sure that you're all on the same page and all in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, particularly as it comes to opening and closing closed sessions. So that is all I have, Madam Chair. And thank you.
And so this afternoon we have a presentation that will be by Captain David Trivett of the Internal Affairs Section Commander, Professional Standards Bureau, Baltimore County Police Department. And he is here at our invitation to discuss a number of things in our open meeting about the process itself. And then we will at some point go into closed meeting to discuss some confidential matters that we're going to have to address in that session. But we're going to start in an open meeting session. So I'm unsure. Do I start with you, Captain?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Again, Captain Dave Trivett with the Baltimore County Police Department, coming up on 28 years with the department. With me today is Lieutenant Steve Longo and Sergeant Chris Smith, both detective supervisors in the Internal Affairs section, and my boss, Colonel Dennis Delp, and Meg Ferguson, Senior Policy Advisor from the Police Department. So, as mentioned, we are part of the Professional Standards Bureau, and Colonel Delp is my direct supervisor. And I want to thank you all for serving, agreeing to be a part of the Administrative Charging Committee. It's a big change for the police department, but we're here to embrace it and keep the transparency that we have, and look forward to having a collective partnership with you. So the Internal Affairs section is comprised of me as a commander. We have 3 lieutenants, 8 sergeants, 3 corporals, 9 detectives, and 4 professional staff to support our mission. Have you all gotten a brief on the structure of the department at all? Just for, I think it's important to give you all an idea. We have the Chief of Police, Chief McCulloch, and then we have 4 colonels who are each of them in charge of a bureau. So we have the Operations Bureau, which is like all of your patrol functions. Criminal Investigations speaks for itself. Professional Standards is Colonel Delp, who is Internal Affairs, Employment, Human Resources, and
Training Academy.
And then we have the Administrative and Technical Support Bureau, which would be vehicle, fleet, technology, evidence, the crime lab. So that's the four colonels. Then below them are majors. We have majors who are in charge of what's called a division. And then we have captains below them. And again, I'm in charge of a section. It's a section or precinct. It's like your precincts, your 10 precincts where you all live, you'd have your precinct commanders. And that's where the bulk of our employees work and have the most interactions, with community members. So that's where most of any of the issues that will come here will come through one of those 10 precincts, for the most part. Then you have lieutenants who are shift commanders. Like at a precinct, you have 3 shifts to cover around the clock: day shift, evening, and midnight shift. And then in your specialized units, you would have a lieutenant in charge of various parts of of the section. Like at the homicide unit, the robbery unit. So the units are headed by a lieutenant. And then you have sergeants and corporals who are your shift supervisors or team supervisors to get down to as far as the direct supervisors for officers, detectives that work in the field or in a specialized assignment. So I just kind of want to lay that there. I think it's helpful to sort of know the structure and where everyone falls into it. So we receive complaints at the Internal Affairs section basically any way they come. They come in U.S. mail. They may come in person to headquarters via email. We have a portal online that you can enter a complaint. We receive them from the Police Accountability Board. They have an email portal as well, which is up and functioning and works. We may get them through the county executive's office or an elected official or a community leader, may receive a complaint. Someone may be more comfortable coming to them. However they come to us, we receive them and then we will investigate them. And once they come to us, we use a database and case management software system called IA Pro. And that's pretty much a nationwide, basically worldwide standard. It's used across the world to track and house confidential internal affairs information. So they go into IA Pro, they're routed through the supervisory chain, and then they're delegated for assignment. And that investigation can be done through internal affairs or back at the command level. So either way, it gets a full and thorough investigation. The complaints can also be received at the precinct level. So officers, supervisors in the field may receive them. And a companion system to IA Pro is called Blue Team. Again, it's an integrated software system for the IA Pro system. And folks in the field enter the complaints in the blue team system. And then again, they go up through supervisory review, and they come to the internal affairs section, and they get imported into the IA Pro system, and then they get routed for assignment, either again through the internal affairs section or to the field at the command level. Wherever the investigation lands to be investigated, once it's complete, it goes through a multi-level layer of review. So if it's a sergeant conducting it, it will get reviewed by a lieutenant, by a captain, and then routed to the internal affairs. If it's done in the field. At internal affairs, it may be handled by a detective, a corporal, or a sergeant as a primary investigator. All of them will conduct investigations. And then again, it gets a multi-level layer review by a supervisory chain up through me as the commander of internal affairs. And the investigations, include interviews with witnesses, gathering of documents, witness statements, body-worn camera footage review, surveillance footage review, basically, interviewing everybody that you can to get a full and accurate picture of what transpired and to determine if there was any wrongdoing by the officer. So, our goal is to find out the truth. Whatever happened, happened. We just we're fact finders. That's what our job is. And so we are guided by our administrative and field manuals, they're called, and then other special orders or standard operating procedures. And the police department has for a long time had a practice of publishing those online. So those are forward-facing documents which the public has access to, and which will ensure that we get you a copy of those as well, so you can see where our policies are to determine if there's a policy violation or not. If there's a policy violation to have.
Does that include your training manuals? Like body-worn camera training manuals?
So some things are on there, but not all of them. But the policy will prescribe the incidents that are required for activation and usage. So it's not necessarily what we train, like the training manual's not on there, but the policy which guides it would be on there. So that's kind of like in a snapshot, what we do and how we do things. It's kind of easier to see like in how the cases are put together in the case management system, but it's confidential information in there. So happy to answer any questions that are kind of like more general, but the specifics of the cases.
All right. So at this point, we've done everything other than taking questions. Anyone have any questions that might need to be addressed in open session? All right. And so is there anything else that we need to do in open session? Otherwise, I'm going to entertain a motion to close. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and motion to close the session.
Second.
I think I have to note who it's seconded by.
Henry,
Mm-hmm.
This presentation, is this being,
That will be enclosed also.
okay.
You need to state the reasons why on the record as well.
And the reason for closing this session is that we are going to be, where's mine? All right, because we will need to discuss investigative proceedings on actual or possible criminal conduct and to comply with Maryland Code Annotated General Provisions, Article Section 4-351, as it pertains to the review of confidential records. I think it's also general, and I think it's also provision is 3-305, General Provisions Article. And we'll also be seeking the advice of legal counsel during closed session, and that's going to be specifically with respect to the Maryland Public Information Act compliance. So those are going to be the reasons for closed session. Did I miss anything, Henry?
Just 1 second. I don't believe so, Madam Chair. That would be correct. If you want to sign here, we have our closed session document. Perfect. Thank you.
And all in favor? Aye.
Just for the record, Ms. Justice is not here, so she will be abstaining.
So All in favor, all have voted in the affirmative, and so now we will go into closed session.
Just 1 second. I'll make sure we're.
All right, now we're back in our open session, and we did have some questions that we wanted to ask of you, Captain, just in open session. So question with respect to policies. So use of force policies are located online on the Baltimore County Police Department website.
Correct.
What kind of policies with respect to body-worn camera would we find on the website?
The prescribed times when officers should be activating them, and then prohibitions against using them, that will also be in the online access, and we can provide copies.
Okay.
We'll reference those in our reports as well.
And then rules of conduct generally, that's also online.
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the investigations that you will perform and in your written findings, is it my understanding that you will also be providing with your recommendation under the matrix as to what you're recommending the sanction would be, the punishment would be?
So we will make recommendations for charging and discipline unless otherwise determined by the chief of police. And then as indicated in the disciplinary matrix, the statewide disciplinary matrix, we also will present pertinent mitigating and aggravating factors and will provide recommendations for any remedial measures that could be taken if the ACC determines not to impose charges.
All right, terrific. Thanks so much. Any other questions that anyone had?
I have a question about the matrix. One of the things, like, it's considering the statewide one is like first violation category A. The current matrix has a different lettering for the categories. Like, not everything falls the same. Is that right? Does that make sense?
Correct.
So how are we gonna know if it's a subsequent violation if category A is currently different than the category A we're gonna work off of? I don't know if I'm making sense. If the A's aren't the same in the old matrix and the new one, how do we know if it's a second category A if the category A has changed?
I don't think we won't be deliberating over anything that hasn't occurred before July 1. So
Don't we take into consideration prior violations?
if that
On the
should
matrix?
happen, then yeah, the prior misconduct will be noted in the report on the investigation, right?
Yes.
Investigator's report.
Yes, it isn't a one-for-one.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, that'll have to be, I would say, based on information we provide, deliberative upon the ACC to wait, and we can reference, it seems to be of a similar nature, we can provide that.
Okay.
And then if we needed a copy of the previous disciplinary matrix, we could get that from you then.
Yes.
All right.
So, one other thing I just wanted to add, there were two different types of incidents which a little more prescribed in a violation, like if you failure to appear in court is a violation, and there's not a whole lot of investigation to show up for court or not. So we will have more of a trimmed down summary of investigation for those, and likewise, most likely for departmental crashes. Departmental crashes are reviewed by a committee of officers who are trained accident investigators, and they submit their findings as to at fault or not at fault to us. And that's how the disciplinary matrix works off of at fault or not. So it will likely be a little bit more trimmed down because they're not as, what happened has already sort of been investigated, and the violation we're noting is based on that investigation. That makes sense.
The ACC wouldn't get a failure to appear in court unless somebody complained about the officer failing to appear. Unless a person from the public would complain about somebody not appearing, right? We wouldn't get that.
No, you likely would, because it involves a member of the public. It doesn't have to be a
Okay.
complaint from the public. It would be involving a member of the public.
And then so crashes that would involve somebody else, we would get that.
Correct.
Crashes involving just departmental property or state property, we wouldn't get that.
Correct. That's And for failure to appear in court, you'll see in the matrix that the first one, there's no disciplinary action taken. So the ACC would be getting them as a second, when it's the second violation for failure to appear in court, the ACC would get that. And that's prescribed in the disciplinary matrix.
Okay. All right, is there anything else that we have questions about? Any questions about the evidence.com? I suspect there will be questions about it when we are actually in it, you know, trying to find things. I did click on the video. I mean, this seems pretty self-explanatory, you know, point, click, and then see what's there. All right. Anybody else have any other questions then? Any follow-up on evidence.com?
And some of the videos, just to state it, is you'll have several videos sometimes of this evidence, and you'll have the officer that was charged, their particular perspective, but you may have several other officers that were there that you may provide to give you different context to the actual occurrence. So just for perspective, you just have to know I'm watching the accused officer's video right now, and know and discern that now I'm watching someone else that's an independent video of the event for the different perspective.
From a different angle.
Yeah, and you may take into consideration the actual perspective may sway you in your determination, looking at it from that person's perspective as opposed to someone else's, because it gives you the overall perspective, but you also looking at it through the eyes or the point of reference from the officer that you use it for whatever the person's charged, which is for.
So, let me ask this of you, Sergeant Smith, the list under evidence.com, so it gives us the, whatever the case number is, and then it'll have the title of the document, right?
Yes.
And then the owner of it. Is that always going to be you if you uploaded it, or is it?
It's just going to be the individual that shared it from my side of the evidence.com web portal. Frequently, that will probably say me.
Okay. So if there are, say, 3 different body-worn camera videos on this list, will we know just by the description under title, like which officers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We standardize the way that those videos are saved, and they should have relative information to the what we call the CC number or the incident number that it's attached to, as well as the officer that was wearing that body camera and a date and time.
Okay, so instead of saying test video here for the training purposes, it would say Officer Smith.
Yes,
Okay,
correct. It would
great.
say something along the lines of Sergeant Smith, my ID number, a CC number, and a date and time.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else? Anything more on that? Okay. I guess unless there's anything more from the department, I guess we can let you go. You fly, be free, and then we can go on with some other matters on our agenda. All right, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Like stated earlier, I'm the point person. If there's any questions that you have about any trouble that folks have with logging on, and then I can send them forward to the department, just so that way it's all being recorded and things aren't even
I'm so
flying
sorry.
through, you know, from different sources.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was very nice speaking to you.
Thank you.
And so now we are on to our question with respect to, this is actually old business, the continuation of old business, an update on the Maryland Public Information Act requests. And this had to do with some questions we have from a legal perspective, but my understanding is part of what we can discuss. We can do an open session, and then at some point we may have to close just very briefly for some other legal advice. Is
If
that
it's
right?
questions,
Okay.
because to me, that'll be attorney-client privilege or deliberative.
All right, okay. So let's start with what our update is on the Maryland Public Information Act requests.
Well, our office received 2 requests. Oh, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Marvin Bryan. I'm Assistant County Attorney with the office. And I'm here with my boss, Chief of Litigation, Bambi Glenn, here to supervise and chime in when necessary. I received 2 questions, I believe. The first question is whether notes are considered records. Work-related notes are not, work-related notes are considered records under the MPIA, so they are considered records. However, almost all work-related notes are considered protected from disclosure under the Maryland PIA. Work-related notes are considered deliberative, work product, or advisory under the MPIA, so it would be protected. So I guess summing up, the answer is yes, work-related notes are considered records. And the second question we received is whether the PIA allows for disclosure of documents presented in a closed session. My definition of a closed meeting is basically a meeting to exclude non-board members and to discuss something in private. So therefore, responsive documents would be protected under the different provisions of the Maryland Public Information Act. Soon the information would be protected on a work product, deliberative, process privilege, or advisory. Verbal discussions and deliberations made during a closed session would most likely fall under that and would be protected and you would not have to disclose that. I would say as one exception, if there's a court-ordered subpoena from a judge, then we can fight the subpoena. However, if the judge rules against us, in that instance, we probably would have to disclose that type of information. However, that's, an unusual circumstance, but we would be able to fight it first before that information would be released if it was a subpoena. So I think those are the 2 questions, and I guess at this time we would close the session for questions.
If there are any members who.
I have a question about the ACC's written opinion. My understanding it's provided to the agency, the officer, and the complainant. Is the complainant under any rules of confidentiality, the same as everybody else is, not to disclose the contents of it? Assuming it contains confidential information.
So, I'm happy to field that, or I think Mr. Callegary also could field it, but I think the rules of confidentiality apply to everyone. There's no exception.
Does the complainant receive that and acknowledge it, is my question?
Does he receive?
The complainant, the person that's complaining, when they get our written opinion, do they receive it acknowledging it's confidential and they aren't to release it also?
That's a policy question, not a legal question, actually.
Oh, it's just a question for whoever will answer it.
I can pull up the language in the legislation here. So the statement in the statute as to confidentiality is the board and its staff shall keep confidential any records, and I'm just pulling through the next section here on that.
If I understand your question, you're asking basically, because the complainant isn't really bound by this, is there something separate that
Correct.
the complainant signs
Correct.
that would reflect his understanding that it remains confidential?
Yes.
And again, I think that actually is a policy question as to whether or not you want to establish a policy that.
Is there one currently?
Yeah, so the way that that language, Don, regarding filing disposition is a member of the administrative charging committee shall maintain confidentiality relating to a matter being considered by the administrative charging committee until filing disposition of the matter. It doesn't include members of the public. They're not,
Okay.
at least under the law as passed, they're not, the county can't per se, enforce a law, as to
Okay.
my understanding at least. Or at least they don't try to say that is a sealed document or a private document, or one that can't be brought up by the member of the public who receives it, the complainant who receives it.
Okay.
So we're charged with keeping the confidentiality throughout the process, right, until the conclusion of the case. That's until beyond the ballot time for the trial board. But the complainant, who has a copy of our report, can discuss it to anybody they want. But we can't.
We can give you legal advice.
No, but I mean,
No,
that's what
right.
it sounds like,
That's-
right?
I'll put it this way, there's not language that I found in the county or Comar that states that the complainant is bound to confidentiality.
Right.
Good question.
So,
Well, I'm asking because as the PAB designate, I want to carry as much information back to the PAB as I can, as much as I'm allowed to. That's helpful. Does that, so,
If you're asking what that consists of, that might be a good question to ask in a closed session.
right.
that is a question I have.
But it sounds like the original question with respect to what confidentiality does complainant have? Apparently none. None that we
That
can
answers
impose
that.
on them. So they could in fact disclose our recommendations, Even
That's a
before,
policy question
right?
versus a.
but they could disclose the recommendations even before the trial board has concluded in that.
Well, the complainant, well,
They get a copy of our opinion.
Is it something that the complainant signs that would prevent them from disclosing? Is it a non-disclosure agreement somewhere in the process?
Not that I've seen,
I doubt
but
it.
no.
I
Is
didn't
it a
see
possibility
anything.
to add that?
That would be up to the state of Maryland.
Yeah.
And, I don't think it's precluded, as to whether the county can do it, I don't have an answer to that. As to whether the state of Maryland could add it, I believe it would be up to them it'd be the state legislature's prerogative to make a decision as to whether or not they want to amend the statute to include that language. But my reading of it is, I have not seen anything which indicates they can't, that it's not, once they have it, they have it.
Mr. Callegary, I would agree with you, and I would also say that if the county wanted to add something like that, it would also be a matter of legislation.
Yeah.
And then we would have different legislation in the state legislation, which is something that people would probably want to look at pretty carefully before they did.
Just again, speaking from a policy standpoint, not from a legal standpoint, it's not something I believe we can do under our rules of procedure, for instance, is to add additional privacy requirements that aren't included in the statute for people who are not members of this committee.
And I guess similarly, if we are contacted by, say, anybody, member of the public or the media or something, if there's an interest in a particular case, and we've done our written recommendations and we've turned it in to the agency, and the complainant has a copy, but we're still under the confidentiality rules until it has played out through the legal process. Any of those kind of questions will need to be referred to Henry. So even though the complainant may know about our recommendation, we cannot comment on it. We will have to refer that person, whether it's a member of the public or the media or whomever, to Henry as our coordinator.
So I'm here for it.
Okay, so are we now then going into closed session in order to entertain the legal advice from a couple of the questions that we had?
So moved.
I think so, right? Okay, so motion to enter closed session for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. Second, all in favor? Aye. And so moved. And so at this time, we'll close the session. Needed to address? No, and then our next meeting date is July 21, 3 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, my apologies.
Okay, the agenda needs to be corrected to reflect that our meeting on July 21, 2023 will be at 1 p.m. in the Jefferson Building, room 104. Everybody have that? All right. And at this time, without any, no new business needing to be entertained, I would like to move to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that's so approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for your time, Martin.